Good morning and happy October. Happy October. Yeah, that's me. We're looking at prayer then and now. This month of October, I thought we would explore prayer, that fundamental spiritual practice, as we get ready to host the incarnation of our divine audacity herself, Linda Martella Whitsitt, who wrote the book Divine Audacity. She's going to be here with us for a weekend of learning and practicing and just jumping into the beautiful energy, the sacred energy of affirmative prayer. We'll talk more about that later. So I thought maybe today we would look at what is affirmative prayer? How is that different than other prayer? Where did it come from? And how has it evolved over time? So, humankind has been praying to a divinity, some kind of divinity from the beginning of time, whether that's the gods, the gods in the sky and in the sun and the moon and the earth and the ocean, right? And then to the gods and goddesses, the mythical gods and goddesses of ancient time, of Greece and Rome. There they are. The ancient gods, that lasted for a long time. And then, of course, the Hebrews the ancient Hebrews made the great discovery of the one God. They're the ones, the one God. And so many people, not everyone, but many people began to pray to the one God. But the prayers were always the same. Doesn't matter really who we were praying to, it was always the same. For crops to grow, for safety and protection, for healing of physical illness, for prosperity, for long life, for our side to win. And we've always prayed to a God outside of us, right? It's like forever we have thought that we are these small, separate people, suffering creatures that have to beseech a capricious God, right? Sometimes God answers our prayers, sometimes he doesn't. Like what? And so we got really clever at coming up with methods that we thought God would hear us. Maybe God would hear me if I really beg, please, God, please listen to my prayers. Because I've gone down on my knees. I'm beseeching you. So if that didn't work, it was sacrifice. A lot of cultures for many years offered sacrifices, even human sacrifices. Hey, let's throw this virgin off the cliff and maybe my crops will grow. Right? And just like some version of sacrifice, it lasted through many cultures for many years. And just bargaining, right? Bargaining. God, please get me out of this mess. You get me out of this mess, I will devote my entire life to you. How many people have done that? So, and there was always someone who claimed that they knew what God wanted and told everybody else. Historically, that's been a man. Right? So this has been the case from the beginning of time. For many people, it still is the case. We're, praying to something outside of us, usually to little effect, which we then think, well, it's because I'm not worthy. Or God, I'm not doing what God wants. I'm not pleasing enough, or I'm not lucky enough. And throughout time, from the very beginning, there have been mystics, masters, saints, sages throughout the ages who have pierced through this nonsense and have tried to share with us a higher truth. But these patterns are so ingrained. They get passed down from generation to generation that it is hard to uproot them, right? And what's interesting is that one of the earliest spiritual texts, sacred texts, the ancient Vedas, there they are, the ancient Vedas, spoke of our oneness with Source and that all that we need is within us. The saying is, Tat Zvam Asi, Tat Zvam Asi. That is what I am, or I am, that I am, which is the same message that Moses received, on the mountaintop. And as we might think about it in unity, mountaintop consciousness, or from the highest divine perspective. So if this is true, if all that we need is within us, if I am that I am, why are we praying to a God outside of us? Right? And other sacred texts has also tried to share a higher truth with us. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells the reluctant warrior, Arjuna, the indwelling self, with a capital S, is all-pervading. It is also eternal and changeless because it is beyond the worldly dimension of time. Time has no access to it. And Krishna also said this about prayer. In truth, any desire is a form of prayer and often results in quick success. The higher the ideal, however, the more arduously one has to pursue it. And then in another part of the world, the Buddha. The Buddha tried to tell us that the universe is within us and that all of our experience is created in mind. The first passage, the first verse of the Dhammapada says, all experience is preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of an ox. All experience is preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows, like a never-departing shadow. Now, these ancient truths may, my theory, may have seeped into the minds of the ancient Greek philosophers. Plato himself is the one that gave us the concept of metaphysics. And he wrote about the illusory nature of the physical world, of physical form, saying that true reality can only be found in the invisible, which we may say as the transcendent, and that all visible forms are sort of copies or shadows of the real thing, which I think is interesting. Then, of course, along comes Yeshua. Yeshua, which we say Jesus now. But, back in the day, he didn't know himself as Jesus. If you were walking down the street and you're trying to get his, yo, Jesus, he wouldn't hear you because that wasn't his name. It was Yeshua. And Yeshua came to share the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within us. The kingdom of heaven is within us. And that prayer, he talked a lot about prayer. He taught us how to pray very clearly. If we ask, believing that we have already received, then we shall receive. So not beg, not beseech, not bargain with a reluctant God, but simply ask. Ask, and know that we are worthy of having the good that we are seeking. He talked all the time about how we are beloved children of infinite love. And that when we align ourselves with our Christ nature, we are empowered to declare, to claim what it is we truly desire from the all-providing good that is always available to us. So Eric Butterworth, who wrote the book, many books, Discover the Power Within You. Eric Butterworth was a unity minister who was very popular in the 70s and the 80s and really into the 90s. Very, very popular. He said this about this concept of asking. The word ask has a much broader meaning than is usually realized. A study of the root word meaning in the original Greek reveals a connotation of claim or demand. To ask for something in prayer is to accept it in consciousness, to lay hold of it. As a child of God, you not only have the right, but the distinct responsibility to command the law because it is the law. There is nothing capricious about it. It works for you as you work with it. I think that's one of the best descriptions of how affirmative prayer works. This idea that all of the great masters and mystics have tried to share with us, right? So unity is part of the New Thought movement, and if anybody here is new to the New Thought movement, it is really originally inspired by the ideas that were forming in the minds of the Transcendentalists. The Transcendentalists being Emerson, Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, John Muir, and they themselves, those ideas themselves, were inspired by the ancient Vedas, which they read, and other Eastern texts. And they combined that with some contemporary authors, thinkers, philosophers, a lot of European, like Carlyle and Goethe, and Emerson himself was a voracious reader of the current day, expansive thinkers and philosophers at the time. And the Transcendentalists completely rejected the traditional Christian idea of praying to a God outside of us, in a beseeching way, and rejected this notion that God could only be accessed by an intermediary, right? And instead came to the understanding that, quote, the belief in a living God in the soul, faith in immediate inspiration, in boundless possibility, and in unimaginable good. Unimaginable good. Doesn't that sound like something we would say today? Like, that sounds like an affirmation, I would say. But this was the mid-1800s. And it was really just a small handful of people who were coming to this. Just a few people, but very smart and very influential. These ideas began to spread. But it really wasn't until these expansive ideas found a way to bring them into a way to apply them practically in our lives, that the New Thought movement really began. And how they did it was a really interesting story, I think. So in New England, which was the place where all of these exciting new ideas were blossoming, that must have been the place to be back then, there came about into popularity a non-medical procedure, healing technique that relied solely on the power of suggestion and imagination. Do you know what I'm about to? Hypnosis, yeah, hypnosis. Or as it was called at the time, mesmerism, from Anton Mesmer, who was the guy who started this, who was experimenting. He was experimenting with individuals, putting them into a very subjective, relaxed, deep state, and then telling them that their blood pressure or their heart rate or their internal temperature was either rising or lowering, depending upon the effect that they wanted to make. And the patients would actually experience that. They would experience that condition. And so into this comes Phineas P. Quimby. But you'll have to say his name that way. Phineas P. Quimby, because like how else could you say that? So he comes into the popular field, and he's fascinated with this mesmerism thing. He wants to learn everything he can about it. So he masters it, he opens a practice, and people are flocking to his door. He's successful because he takes this thing that's been experimented with to the next level, and he uses it for healing of physical ailments, mental, emotional maladies. And he finally comes through this practice of years of practice, he comes to the understanding that our wholeness is our innate state. That wholeness is our innate state. And our innate nature is divine. And that if we're experiencing illness, he thought, it's because we have a false idea in our consciousness. And if we can remove the false idea and bring our consciousness back to its proper understanding, that we would experience a healing. And he had this experience. That's why he was so successful. People were coming to him from all over. So a lot of other practitioners came along during this time, were experimenting with this, kind of, began to take it further, take it to, as one does, take it to the next step. And after some time, they began to drop the necessity of hypnotism, and it really became a spiritual practice. It really became diving deeply into a deep connection with spirit, and once there, really affirming our wholeness and our worthiness of having the good, because the divine essence that we are, right? Which was the transcendentalist. So this is where these two came together. So we get the transcendentalist beliefs here, which were from, the ancient times. So they put this together with this whole practice of, hypnosis, and they sort of came together, and the New Thought movement was born. That's kind of it, the synopsis of kind of the New Thought movement. Now, the other thing I want to say about the New Thought movement is that from the very beginning, from the Transcendentalists, they welcomed and empowered women to become leaders, which is why you see a lot of Unity ministers and CSL ministers are women, because from the beginning, they recognized, our ability to be spiritual leaders and empowered. And one of the earliest students of Quimby's was Mary Baker Eddy, who's there on the left. Mary Baker Eddy, who actually came to Quimby for healing. She was healed. She became his student, learned everything he had, and then sort of took it off into kind of her own thing and created a little more rigid system, but using those same ideas. That became Christian Science. And then her student, this is Emma Curtis Hopkins, that's her student, said, well, these are great ideas, but I don't want this rigid system. I want to be open to, evolve my consciousness. And so she left and started her own seminary, I think in Chicago or something, trained and ordained many ministers, many of whom women, who went out everywhere into the country and started their own group. One of her students were Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who started Unity. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is known as the teacher of teachers and a true mystic. So they are the ones that started unity. And you know, what I love about unity in this New Thought movement is that it is eternally evolving, right? We are forever open to new ideas, new ways of looking at things. The science, looking at science and religion and see where they come together, and they're more and more, they come together more and more all the time, right? And looking at quantum physics and new methods of healing and new methods of thinking, it is really something that is, I think, one of the most beautiful things. And whenever somebody tries to pigeonhole us, put us in a box with a label, like the CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries, who's no longer there, tried to say, everybody's going to call yourself New Thought Christian now. And all of the Unity Centers said, wait, what? No, we don't want a label. You can't do that. You can't put that in a label. So he was let go. Because here's the thing. We are ever evolving. We want to be open at the top, right? Which is this is Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living. When I was in that, it was originally called Religious Science. And they're sort of sister organizations, right? So we honor our history, absolutely. We honor our teachers. We absolutely embrace Charles Fillmore and Ernest Holmes, who had this really advanced thinking, these advanced ideas, like they were before their time, and really shared them with us. We embrace that, but we also want to, and they said themselves, I am open at the top. I reserve the right to change my mind. So this, as you're seeing here, is a beautiful quote. Ernest Holmes talked a lot about affirmative prayer, and he's talking about affirmative prayer as a communion with the One. Prayerful communion ascends to that place where unity has not yet become variety, where the unformed One is ready to take any specific shape. In this act of communion, the individual becomes co-partner with the eternal and gives birth to time, space, and conditions. You see, we're an integral part of the whole experience of creation. So I thought it might be a good idea to use, and we're going to talk more about affirmative prayer this month, but I want to share, if you bring the next slide, these are the steps of affirmative prayer. Really basically relax, focus, meditate. Integrate is something Linda Martella-Whitsitt she is evolving this whole step of affirmative prayer. That's one of the words that she's using. Integrate, I love that. Realize is the next step, and then gratitude and release. So I thought maybe we would have an experience of affirmative prayer together, that we hold the idea of, and hey, how about we do a prayer for all of those affected by the hurricane? Does that sound like something we can do together? Okay, so I invite you to close your eyes, sit back, and really become a relaxed energy. Just feel that relaxed energy, breathing, going back to that space that Chris so beautifully created for us. And as we breathe, we relax not only our physical body, we relax our ego mind, we relax our attachment to the world of effect, the world of form, temporary world of form. We let that go, we relax, we continue to breathe. And as we do, we can open to a higher dimension, a higher reality. We can see from this higher perspective, and we focus here on this higher perspective, this infinite divine presence that is eternal, omnipresent, everywhere, fully present as love, as peace, as whatever it is that anyone needs. And in this moment, we see that we are expressions of this one. Each of us is a beautiful emanation of this one divine love, this one divine light. And as expressions, as co-creators with this infinite divine power of love, we together claim and accept. We put a demand upon, or ask, which is to claim and put a demand upon this principle of love, as we affirm that anyone who is affected by the hurricanes, that they have everything that they need, that whatever it is that they need is being made available for them now. We affirm a deep and abiding comfort and an eternal peace and a divine love that we see them opening up to. We bless anyone who has lost anyone in this experience. Again, affirming that abiding comfort, surrounded by the arms of infinite love. We affirm that they are leaning into the power of grace. And we see and affirm humanity opening their hearts, helping one another, neighbors helping each other, people coming in from other places who are saying, I love you, I want to take care of you, I want to give you whatever it is you need, no matter who they are, rich or poor, Democrat or Republican, engaged or disaffected, it doesn't matter. People are coming together and saying, you are another being like me. What can I do to help? We see this, we give thanks for it. It's such an affirmation of our humanity, of our oneness with each other. Our oneness with each other. We give thanks that this is blossoming all over in all of these places, and it is contagious. Love is contagious, and it is being felt by everyone, everywhere, as we witness people coming together for each other. We give thanks for this opportunity to expand our hearts and our consciousness and embrace all of these individuals with our love and our prayer, knowing that Spirit is there, right here, right now, in all of these people's lives, as well as our own. We give thanks for the reawakening in our consciousness of what Spirit is, where Spirit is, of our oneness and our ability to speak the word as co-creators. We give thanks for the healing that is happening right now. In loving gratitude, we release this affirmative prayer, knowing that there is no time, no space, that it is being done in this moment, and that all can feel it. Thank you, Spirit. And so it is. Amen. Your breath and come back. Feel that shift. It's a shift. And when we do this together, when we combine our consciousness together, there is a big shift that's happening. Thank you for participating in that with me. That's the power of affirmative prayer. Hi. If this video has inspired you, opened your heart, expanded your consciousness, filled you with hope, empowered you in some way, we encourage you to support what we offer here at Unity Center of Peace by making your donation now. And thank you.